I'm with Rosie Ross from Jerusalem, and we're talking about the Atlit detention camp that the British ran during the British Mandate of Palestine. Now, Rosie, can you give a brief outline of the historic background of Atlit detention camp and its special events being held there on the 7th of May?
Atlit detention camp is where the British authorities under the British Mandate held many Jewish immigrants into the area known as Palestine in those days. The Jewish people know it and knew it then as Eretz Israel. But under the British it was known as Palestine. And there were many, many immigrants seeking refuge in Palestine and Israel at that time. Many had escaped from the Holocaust, and the British held these people in detention camps, camps that had certain resemblances to concentration camps. The main camp that we're talking about is Atlit detention camp, which is situated just south of Haifa on the Mediterranean coast. But many Jewish people, 52,000 in fact, were sent away by the British to detention camps in Cyprus. There were also over 1,000 Jewish refugees who were sent away to what has been described as a prison in Mauritius. I can tell you a little about the event that we're going to hold on May the 7th. Over the years, we as British Christians have held special reconciliation events at Atlit detention camp. We've come in sorrow and shame for the way in which our nation acted towards the Jewish people at this time in our history. And so this is not the first event. There have been a couple of other events that have taken place back in 2005 and 2006. But we felt the need to hold this event because now more Jewish people are becoming aware that there is a considerable volume of British Christians who feel deeply sad about what happened and ashamed of what we did in that period. And because we're building relationships with these Israelis, we see that this whole period of history needs to be uncovered more and more, both in the churches in Britain and also in the nation in Britain. It's been a period that's been kept undercover. And so few people in Britain know about this history. I think many people in Britain, if they did know about the history, would be deeply ashamed.
What sort of stories have you heard about from the British Mandate about these Jewish people trying to get into the country?
Okay, well, we've got one particular man whom we got to know, and he and his mother were on board one ship that the British held in the harbour. It was known as the Patria ship. And his father was put on another ship and sent away to Mauritius, to the prison camp there. He and his mother were on board the Patria ship when the Israelis, seeking to disable the ship, actually caused a terrible explosion which ended up in 200 people dying from that ship. This man, who was a baby at the time, was with his mother, and his mother thought, and many others thought, he'd been drowned, but miraculously he escaped. And but sadly he escaped from death. But then he and his mother were taken to Atlit detention camp and held there for a period before they were set free by the British.
Were there some people who came hoping to seek refuge in Israel but were turned away and ended up dying in the Holocaust?
I have heard that there were some who were turned back to Poland by the British, and that they ended up going back to the camps. I can't give you details of that, but I certainly have heard that, and that is recorded in one of the books that Israelis have written that I've got a copy of in English. Another story is of another Israeli whom we got to know, and he was held in the Akko prison, in the Jerusalem prison, and in the Atlit detention camp. Now, his crime at the age of 17 was that he was fighting with the Haganah, the pre-IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. And the reason he was fighting the British was because they were stopping all these immigrants, many of whom had come out of the Holocaust and were seeking refuge in Israel. He was trying to stop these ships being turned away from Haifa harbour by the British. Because he knew that the people who were in these ships were Holocaust survivors, and that they were being turned away to prison camps in Cyprus. We'll call them detention camps to give the British the benefit of the doubt, but if you read the descriptions, I think many would agree they were like prisons. So anyway, this gentleman then was fighting with the Haganah and was trying to lay some mines to stop the British going down to Haifa port in order to stop them sending the Holocaust survivors away to these camps, terrible camps in Cyprus. So he was arrested, and I think he spent 2.5 years all in the British detention camps and prisons.
Now, what will be happening on the 7th of May, which coincides with the British elections taking place on the same day? How significant do you see this in terms of Britain's conduct of the mandate?
Well, I think the Lord has arranged it that we will be having this event on the 7th of May. I didn't plan it for British election day. It wasn't some publicity stunt on my part. It just happens to be a very good time for those in the Atlit detention camp, because the children who would normally be going round the Atlit detention camp hearing the history of what Britain did are on holiday on that day. So we have the opportunity to hold the event. I feel it's very significant that people are coming over from Britain to participate in this event. We have a man called Lord Reading and his wife who will be speaking at this event, and he will be expressing the deep sorrow and shame of many, many Christian people and members of the British Jewish community at what happened during this period of British history. And we do believe that it is significant for Britain, because we believe it's very significant that people in Britain take responsibility for our own history. Because unless we do that, we're set to repeat history. And some of those anti-Semitic attitudes that were very, very strong during the mandate, we see continuing today in Britain. And as we take a stand over what happened in the past, we believe it's important in standing with the Jewish people today, as well as looking back into history.
And what sort of response has there been so far to the event from Christians and Jews alike, and members of Parliament and the Knesset?
Okay, we've had a good response from British Christians. We've got a good number coming over from Britain. At the moment, I have around 70 people signed up, Christians who are coming. That includes several who are not British, but who have some British connection. And they're standing with us in what we're seeking to do. But people are coming in at the last minute all the time. And we have I've also heard that somebody said that, one of the heads of a particular synagogue in the UK had heard about the event and was considering coming. So I think this is going to be one of those things that comes together at the last minute, as many things do in Israel. The publicity is still going out within Israel. I've been speaking to several Israelis who assure me that they are coming. Atlit detention camp is sending out publicity. We have a member, or former member of the Israeli Knesset, who will be speaking. Some of you will have seen him in the film The Forsaken Promise. His name is Shlomo Hillel. He will be speaking. He's aged 91. He will be speaking at our ceremony, and we're very thankful that he has been so gracious towards us in our attempts to make reconciliation with the Jewish people over what happened in the Mandate.
And what do you hope will come out of this special event in terms of healing the past and building stronger relations between Jews and Christians in the future?
Well, I believe what needs to come out from the point of view of British Christians is an awareness that we're still very blind about this period of history. We can make statements about how there needs to be peace in the Middle East and how Israel needs to push for the peace process. But what about taking responsibility for our own history and really coming in humility before the Jewish people concerning what did happen? And we know that many Jewish people still deeply carry the wounds of what happened during this time frame. We're meeting them, we're getting to know them, we're meeting their families, and we know there's a deep wound that's been left in the hearts of many Jewish people, and not just in the individuals' hearts, but in the heart of Israel as a whole, because of how Britain betrayed her, having made certain promises under the Balfour Declaration, and how there was within Britain, from the 16th, 17th century onwards, a real move to support the return of the Jewish people to their homeland. And this was something that was started because many people were reading their Bibles and understanding from the scriptures that in the scriptures it says that God is going to bring his Jewish people back from the four corners of the earth. So we in Britain need to get back to that positive heritage, that is there in the church. We need to look at that heritage and consider it, and look at our Bibles in a completely different way to the way in which many British people are reading their Bibles.
Are you wanting and pushing for an apology from the British government?
We would very much like to see an apology from the British government. I have been in touch with the British Embassy here, and sadly at the moment we don't have anybody coming to represent them, but I will continue to make them aware of what we are doing. And I do feel though that God calls the church to a place of repentance and to a place of apology, and that we can't expect the British government to apologise when there hasn't been a formal apology from church leaders in Britain, and I believe that needs to come first.
Okay, Rosie Ross, thank you very much.
Thank you.